Hello, BookTube. We have now decisively left puppy territory behind. I am actually standing up, which is exhausting. But we're going to continue on with this side Penguin bookcase, because I realized something about it when I was thinking about these books that I've been taking off and piling on the floor. I was trying to figure out what was going on here, because I recently organized my Penguin wall. Not exhaustively, but roughly, so that I wasn't spending half an hour looking for something. I roughly organized it. We're roughly chronological from left to right, with countries and time periods grouped together, so that if I was looking for Moby Dick, I would know roughly where to look for it instead of the whole wall. And I realized something about this right-hand bookcase, the bookcase all the way to the right-hand side, which is that I got bored and tired with doing that organizing before I reached this bookcase. That's the only explanation for why there's such hodgepodge over here. So this is actually really good that I'm doing this, to pull all this out, and then I will go over it all and find out what I want, what I don't want, and where it all goes. So this is helpful. So we're going to start with this is just another brief shelf of penguins. We have 2 more of these to go, and then we'll commence with the collection in earnest. These things I don't really know what's going to happen to. So this first one is really thick. Whatever. Oh, okay. This is the N.J. Dawood translation of the Quran with the Arabic, and lots and lots of critical judgment calls that just go on through here. And a big thing that I have reinforced here. I got this in 1990 or 1995. So so the first one is the Quran. That's okay. Then okay. all right. The next one is the Quran by N.J. Dawood. This is a much newer Penguin trade paperback. I believe, if I remember correctly, that he did tinker around with this and fix it, change some things. I don't think this is identical to the other one. Okay, all right. So the next one is okay. All right, it's getting a little excessive here. This is the Quran by N.J. Dawood. This is the same thing, and again, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, each one of these is subtly different from the one before it, which is a perfect argument in favor of an approach that I insisted on a long time ago, which is that when a translator translates a work, you either engage them in binding arbitration that they never tinker with that translation again. Just move on. If you're unhappy with your work, then translate the work again. But don't tinker with your original translation. Either do that, or the minute they hand over their manuscript for Montesquieu or Livy or whatever, have somebody take them out behind the publishing house and shoot them. But one way or another, I think that all 3 of these Dawood Qurans is slightly different from the other. And then what's next here? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. This is the N.J. Dawood Quran. This is one in a normal penguin size instead of an oversized. But even that, I think... Okay, all right. This is the Dawood Quran in a normal size penguin paperback, not an oversized. And this one also doesn't have the Arabic. And I think the translation, again, is subtly different from the first 3 that we saw. So this is a wonderful example. I love Penguin Classics, of course, and I have very fond memories of reading the Dawood translation, but I do not need 4 Penguin Qurans. I simply don't. So that's great that I know these are here. I know there's a problem, and I can fix it. So what have we got here? Oh, wow. Okay, this is Don Marti. This is Archie and Achitophel. This is a very good example of Penguin taking chances, doing things that you would never consider a Penguin classic, trying to extend their mantle onto works of their own editorial choosing instead of the ones that were chosen by time, by usage, by the canon, and with wonderful results. That's why I love this adventurous spirit of Penguins. Is an aspect of theirs that is often overlooked in favor of their very attractive translations and presentations of classics. But I really like it. Archie and Achitophel is hard. It's hard to explain what this is. It's political and social satire, but it doesn't look like it. It's biting satirical humor, but it doesn't sound like it. It's just, it's, I think I wrote about it. If I wrote about it, I will try and find my writing of it. Maybe I did a better job. And what have we got? Oh, this I certainly wrote about. The Grimke sisters. This is on slavery and abolition, essays and letters by Sarah and Angelina Grimke, who were fervent abolitionists who had skin in the game because they came from the slaveholding world. And they did the public speaking route. They had abuse heaped upon them. They were called disgraces to their people and to their sex. And their writing is incredible. Their writing is infused with fire. This is a wonderful volume to have. And I do believe I wrote about it. Let's see here. Okay, Zitkala Sa. This is American Indian Stories. Just a writer, teacher, activist, Zitkala Sa, who was born in 1876 and died in 1938, championed Native American causes throughout her life. Born in the year of the Battle of Little Bighorn, she was raised on a Sioux reservation, educated at boarding schools that enforced assimilation, and witnessed to major events in white Indian relations. And this is just a collection of her work, fiction and nonfiction. And this thing is beaten up. Oh, okay. Well, yes, this is beaten up because I use it all the time, and maybe that means I should reinforce it, show it some love. This is Paul Keegan's Penguin Book of English Verse. It's a big, thick thing. I will set this aside because this needs to be restored to good condition. This is just a gigantic classic anthology of English verse. It's not the Oxford Book of English Verse, of course, but it's right up there. I use it all the time, and probably there have been times in the last year where I've come over here to the Penguin Shelves looking for it and haven't been able to find it because I just don't think about this right-hand stuff, and that's terrible. That has to change. Okay, great. So then we have Equiano. This is his controversial autobiography. His narrative recounts his kidnapping in Africa at the age of 11, his service as the slave of an officer in the British Army, British Navy rather, and his years of labor on slave ships until he was able to purchase his freedom in 1766. And it's a fascinating story, and he tells it really well. But the thing I remember about this volume is how comfortably you are resting in the editorial hands of Vincent Coretta, who's the editor of this volume. He really knows everything about the subject, and he wants you to feel comfortable, and it really shows. Some editors on Penguin volumes know everything about their subject, but they have no idea how to make you feel comfortable with what they know. They have no idea. They think that their job as editors is to show how much they know instead of share enough of it so that you can love the work they're introducing. That's just it's always a tricky combination. Oh my God. Oh my. Oh. Over my shoulder you will see this right here. I don't know if you can tell, but this is a half moon indentation. This is all of this is chewed. But this is a half moon exactly in the shape of a basset hound's mouth. Once upon a time, 15 years ago, this bookcase was next to a couch. It was exactly on level with a couch. And my fat little basset hound Lucy just spent the whole day chewing on it like a beaver. I came back and there was a half moon indentation on the shelf. Oh, I just saw that. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so this next one is Malthus. His massively influential book on out-of-control human population, on what the factors are and what you can predict from it. His predictions didn't turn out to be quite right, but I think he was one of the only people in his time period who would have looked at a world with 8 billion humans on it and not been surprised. So it's fascinating reading. I think Malthus is one of those authors I kind of prefer to read about than to read. Okay, this should not be here. This is early fiction in England, from Geoffrey of Monmouth, who we've already met, to Chaucer. This is a collection of early fiction in England. This does not belong here. It belongs next to Chaucer and next to Geoffrey of Monmouth. It belongs on that shelf. But it's here now. This is I think a fairly modern thing. 2015. Yeah, so before we knew each other, but But still, what's this one? Thin. Okay, it's another copy of Graham Greene's The Comedians. Didn't we run across this before? I think this is a second copy of this. His novel, The Comedians. Oh, goodness. Okay. And Reconcerting Political Justice, William Godwin, a fundamental, gigantic, crackpot, ranting, frothing, rolling eyes, foam at the mouth tract about anarchism and politics. It's vivid reading. Absolutely vivid. Doesn't make any sense at all, but it's vivid, vivid reading. It shouldn't be here, so... Okay, all right. Again, shouldn't be here. There's a whole shelf, or there's two shelves for Penguin classic American literature. This is Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe. This is probably the only version of Uncle Tom's Cabin that I have. It shouldn't be over here. It should be with American literature. This should be with Moby Dick and Call of the Wild and whatnot. All right, so we're putting all these on the floor. We'll just clear this out. This next one, I can sort of tell the Penguin classics that are relatively recent because they'll still have pub sheets in them. Although God knows how many of these I actually got from Penguin. Quite a few, probably. Okay, this one we saw before. This is the second copy of the Penguin Book of the Undead. With the little hands creeping over the border there. Which is just a collection of 1,500 years of supernatural encounters. And I think those of you who watch BookTube would probably agree with me that if I have a second copy of this, the second copy should go to Cameron. Who's over at his channel on BookTube because he's the king of all things creepy. not that came out wrong. Not him himself, but he celebrates creepy horror-related fiction. I'll have to remember to. I'll set this aside and remember to send this to him in the next package that goes out. The mail rounds never stop. They're not going today. Today is a mail day. I could go to the post office, but I'm just going to spend the day writing and reading instead with my bean. But tomorrow. Yeah, the mail goes out tomorrow. This could go to him tomorrow. Along with mail to a whole bunch of the rest of you. Mail never stops. Okay, all right. This is, I think we saw this author, but not quite this book. This is Ray Russell again. This is Haunted Castles, the complete gothic short stories of Ray Russell, with an introduction by Guillermo del Toro. And this is just American pulp gothic horror. The definitive complete collection of Ray Russell's masterful gothic horror stories, including the famously terrifying novella trio, including Sardonicus, Sagittarius, and Sanguinarius. Not really my cup of tea. Might make a good double bill with Cameron. Let's see. Let's see what this next one is. Pretty thin. Oh. Okay. All right. This is The Wind in the Willows. Graham Greene's classic kids book in a Penguin classic, which I think I would only read for the introduction because I believe, I actually have The Wind in the Willows that I want. A big, oversized children's book. That's what this is. This is what this should be. And it's also profusely illustrated in color and in black and white. So, since I have that edition and I know that I want that edition, I don't know. I would probably keep this one for the introduction. I doubt I would ever read. Who would ever want to read an unillustrated Wind in the Willows? Let's see here. Oh, okay. Well, no wonder this one's beaten up too, because I use this a lot. This is a, believe it or not, relatively contemporary poet, whom I love, whose work I love. This is Giacomo Leopardi. And this is an English translation by Jonathan Galassi, but it also has the Italian. It's facing page Italian. And Leopardi is great. He's just fantastic. This is his Conti. He wrote a couple of other things, but this is his beautiful, classical book of poems that are just so... I don't read Leopardi in English. I mainly have this because this has the whole of the Conti in Italian. But I firmly believe he was so his poems are so beautiful to read out loud that I firmly believe that even if you don't know Italian and you read one of his poems out loud in Italian, you would hear how beautiful it was, even if you didn't know what it was saying. I firmly believe that. But I absolutely love this poet. So this has to go off to one side too, because this needs to be, this is all beaten up. I need to protect this before it gets any worse. And then the last one is fairly thick. What have we got here? Oh, God. Okay, this is the Memoirs of William Tecumseh Sherman, the great American Civil War general. great and terrible American Civil War general whose main claim to fame as a general relies on war crimes, relies on him conducting merciless, full-scale military operations against civilian populations. People that he knew were civilians, people that he conducted those operations specifically because they were civilians. He wanted their menfolk, their brothers and their fathers and their brothers-in-law who were out in the field fighting against the Union, he wanted them to know the full price of their insurrection, of their rebellion. And that's something you can do when you're operating in a gigantic army on the soil of your opponent. You can do that. That's a luxury you have in a civil war, is that you can punish, not just fight, but punish your opposition. But we shouldn't let the fact that Sherman could simply march into Georgia or South Carolina, we shouldn't let the fact that he could simply march overland into those places confuse us. It is no different. Actions like that are no different from bombing raids on civilians done in Germany during World War II by the Allies. That it's still a war crime. It's still you carrying the war to people that you know are not participating in it, just because you think they might be supporting it or might kind of like it if the other guy won. That's not sufficient justification to bomb women and children. There is no sufficient justification to bomb women and children or to set fire to their houses. And stand by, you'll never read it in this memoir. This is a sanitized version, very much. And unfortunately, Sherman's memoirs have set the tone for what he did. People have been very impressed by the literary quality of these memoirs. I don't see it myself. I've read hundreds of military memoirs from the Civil War on both sides, and I don't see any literary merit in this that it compares to a patch on some of the others that aren't as famous. But people want you to concentrate on that, and they take the line of Sherman being, tough but fair, chivalrous. He sculpted a lot of his own reputation, so you will never read in this volume, nor in most American Civil War histories, the full breadth of what Sherman's army did to those innocent civilians in its path. But all you have to do is read. There are accounts, and they are verifiable. There are accounts that are identical by people who did not know each other. So if you were a conscientious historian, you could draw a pretty clear picture of what his army did on its march to the sea. But even if you didn't have those accounts, if you know anything about history, if you know anything about a rampaging army that's out in the field, you're obviously not paying them. So in order to keep them from simply leaving, or from hanging you up from a tree and then leaving, you have to give them something. You have to give them booty or freedom. You either give them stuff that they can collect from the towns they're ransacking, or you give them people. And give here is in heavy italics with air quotes on it. And that rule is ironclad. Those of you who know military history will know there are certain rules of armies in the field that are ironclad. No army does without them. You can't do without them. And that's one of them. If you're the general of an army that is rampaging wild through a countryside of your enemy, then you can guess what Sherman's army did. And you'd be right. And it's not in this book. So this book is to me, a curio of the time. I thought that I would... it's a perfect example of another thing I've been talking about on this channel, that I have books that I think I'm going to use for research, and then I don't. I reviewed a recent version of an annotated version of this memoir. I also reviewed a recent biography of Sherman, and in neither case did I consult this in any way, not even the introduction, not even the notes. So it's a Penguin classic, and it's a famous one, but other than that, I don't know why I have it. But anyway, that is a kind of a somber note to end this shelf tour on. That is our next shelf tour of this Penguin right-hand book. As you can see, there was virtually no rhyme or reason to this, although we should count our blessings that the whole shelf wasn't the Quran. The first 4 books out of 20 were the same book, by the same translator, in the same edition. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.